how do you get the four seam on the right axis? So it depends on the goal, right? So like, I don't know if there's a quote unquote like right or wrong axis for a specific pitch, because it's going to be tailored to you know, your repertoire and what you want to accomplish. But you know, for me, when I look at the four seam, again, I don't even think I've really talked about this much, but just like the first thing that popped in my mind was when I look at the four seam and just the slow-mo videos that I've done just recently with myself, it's like, it's all timing, man. Like the timing of the hand coming through the zone. Like there's so many, it's so crazy to watch it in super slow-mo, but like you see, like there's so many different moving parts to it. And then at that last second, right before pitch release, the wrist kind of gets into that position where it's on time behind the baseball, and then at pitch release it's even keeled, and then you see pronation. So it's just like, think about that timing, right? Like one little tiny thing gets thrown off in there and the ball could be, you know, tilted this way or whatever. I see a lot of guys that struggle, myself included, that, you know, we talk about how do I fix like a cut on the four seam, like an accidental cut. Why am I cutting the ball, blah, blah, blah. Like that's the same thing, right? Like that's the axis. That's you not being on time. That's you making or coming through the zone, and your hand's just a little bit late to get into those optimal positions. And then you try to speed up, but what happens is that right before pitch release, your fingers don't get into that right spot. So they're just a little bit late, so it gets you on the side of the baseball, which creates that cutting axis instead of that on time behind the baseball four seam true axis, which is interesting too, because the more that I started doing slow-mo videos on myself, I started realizing that I'm like perfect, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm like perfectly on time. That's why you see you know, a lot of my Rapsodo data or, you know, pitch data, you'll see that my spin efficiency is really high. I have a really true like 1230, 1245 axis, which is spinning, you know, almost 612, which would be the opposite of 12.6, which is interesting and funny to me, because throughout my entire career, I've been a guy that actually had dealt with problems of like cutting four seams and almost sometimes pitching with like a natural cut on my ball. So when I started, you know, really diving into the whole pitch design and slow-mo and Rapsodo and all the data stuff, like I thought that I would see that kind of cutting stuff, but I didn't. So somewhere along the route of, you know, having surgery and getting back to throwing, I corrected that timing issue. So how do you get the right four seam axis, man? It's timing, and I know everyone's not going to have the you know, the opportunity to throw in front of like an Edgertronic or a slow-mo or even like a Rapsodo or a pitch tracker or whatever it is. But that's something that I think you can get with your throwing partner with and be like, hey, if you can just let me know, like, how's the ball coming in? Is it true? Is it not? Is it fading? Is it cutting? Is it running? Like what's, you know, that's going to tell you a lot just based on, you know, what his feedback for you could be. Even like when you're throwing a bullpen, like tell your catcher, you know, like, hey, do you mind giving me some feedback today on when I throw a four seam? Like, let me know if it stays true, if it rides, if it fades, if it cuts. Those are all really good, you know, terminologies to kind of take into consideration, because that'll give you a really good understanding of what your ball is doing, you know, through time and space. So hopefully you got something from that, and good question.